My name is Kara Donnelly, and my topic of research is a shift in print media, a look at the interpretation of the role in print media from Columbine to Parkland. So I kind of chose this topic because I was interested to see how media has changed from 1999 when Columbine took place to 2018 with our most recent shooting in Parkland. So just before we begin, I want to kind of touch base and just have you understand the definition of a mass shooting. A mass shooting is a shooting that involves the death of 4 people that takes place in one location. So why did I do this study? I really just wanted to measure the differences in media coverage, specifically print, from Columbine to Parkland. I chose print because I felt that this was one of the only mediums that was consistent throughout the times and really hasn't shifted or changed too much. So I feel that mass shootings have become a norm in society. I think that they have become topical. I looked at a study by the Washington Post that said that more than 228,000 students have experienced gun violence on school grounds. And this kind of matched up with another statistic that I found about the United States and how we have only 5% of the world's population, but 31% of the world's population of gun violence. So we kind of see that this frequency has increased with mass shootings. So to backtrack a little bit, in Littleton, Colorado in 1999, 13 students were left dead and 20 injured in these shootings at Columbine High School. Then fast forward a couple years later, in 2012, 20 children and 6 teachers were murdered in the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. And then today, one of the most infamous shootings was the mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, leaving 17 students dead. And so I just wanted to kind of touch base on those 3 mass shootings in particular because I felt that those 3 kind of had the most media impact, especially in print media. So I felt that what tied these 3 awful mass shootings and tragedies together was media coverage. And like I said before, I just wanted to use print because I felt that this was consistent or the most consistent amongst all of the times where they took place. I also felt that people are becoming numb to the media coverage that is happening after these tragedies. I feel that in 1999 this was new and you didn't really hear about it too much, but today we're almost numb to it. We see it so much, whether it's on TV or on our social media or even in newspapers. And so I just feel that we have almost become desensitized to the topic of mass shootings and the tragedies that happen. It has become a norm for us. So that's why I decided to do this research. I kind of wanted to just dig in and see really what was going on with print media. So I did look up studies similar to mine. So one of the studies I found was by a journalist named Adam Harris. He works for The Atlantic currently, and his research was on how long mass shootings were given print media attention. He, through his research, found that mass shootings really only had a time period lasting around a week. They never really went further than a week, which is kind of what I expected and how I felt it was today. Then I felt like it was important to kind of reflect on Columbine because that was one of the mass shootings that really started the inflation in media coverage. So I went back and I looked at the Denver Post archives and found that Columbine was covered for nearly 2 years. The decline of this coverage started right after, or the decline of this coverage happened right around 9/11. So for that first year, we saw, what was this victim about? What was he doing, or what were they doing? Why did this happen? What were the reasons for it? Then we saw, okay, well, these are the victims, and this is how they felt. So you kind of see that full coverage of everything that happened. And slowly it started to turn into a memorial. Then I went and looked at Times Magazine, and this was in reference to Parkland and the shooting that occurred at Parkland. This whole story was based on social reform, and all of the print media that I found in relation to Parkland had to do with gun reform. It wasn't that I was searching to see, what Parkland was about, etc. It really just turned out that the most print media coverage included things referencing the National Rifle Association, also referred to as the NRA, or how these students wanted their own type of gun reform and they wanted change. They also published research about how emotionally draining it is for people to watch these tragedies and to look at these tragedies. So they said that our brain, in a way, actually shuts down, and this is why we become numb to news in the media. A study at Elon University also focused on a theory relating to numbness in the media. And so with this, again, we just kind of saw that we kind of tune out tragedy. We don't want to see it. We don't want to deal with it. We've almost become burnt out. And that's basically what all these studies said. And so I felt like that was important, linking it to my study. So for my research, I decided it would be best to conduct a focus group consisting of 5 to 10 people. I wanted to stay within the age range of 18 to 22 age demographic with a background in political science. I felt that this age group and this demographic specifically, they were able to develop opinions being in political science. I felt that, because I used students from Florida Southern College, I felt that they would be able to have their own opinions on this issue. They have looked into Columbine, and they have looked into Sandy Hook, and they have looked into Parkland, and they've done this research, and they've developed their own opinions, especially from what has stemmed more recently out of mass shootings and these tragedies. So I felt that this was the perfect demographic to have a focus group in. I also conducted 2 interviews, and they were between the ages of 35 and 45. I wanted this age group because I wanted them to remember Columbine. They were alive for it. They remember the media coverage that took place, and I felt like this was really important. I also did find 35 to 45-year-olds, 2 of them, who were really in the vicinity of Sandy Hook Elementary School during the time of the mass shooting. And I felt like this was important to my study because they were able to look at the local newspaper, and they were able to read it, and they were able to see the headlines and analyze it and really internalize it as well. So I just wanted to get their perception of the media and how they felt, and really, what did they think about it? What did they think about the coverage of Columbine versus Sandy Hook versus Parkland now that they live in Florida? So kind of just seeing what they thought about everything. And for my focus group, going back to that, I was able to gather 5 political science students from Florida Southern College, and they all had a decent knowledge of Columbine and Parkland and mass shootings and the events that were covered in media after that. So I did reach out personally to them. because it is the summer months, it's very hard to put out a broad statement and have people respond in that way. So I did personally reach out to them, and they all accepted, signed a consent form. I recorded the focus group. I also took notes on it, just so I was able to really gauge that accuracy in what they were saying and really reflect on it as well. So we did this focus group in a private room in the library at Florida Southern College because I wanted that focus between the participants and having them all engage in conversation. I wanted it to flow. I had guiding questions that were listed in my appendix in my research paper, and those were my guiding questions, but I wanted them to take those questions and roll with it. I wanted to hear them talk and conversate and take notes from that. So I felt it was really important to have a casual atmosphere going about it. So the focus group lasted about an hour and 45 minutes. We went straight for 45 minutes just talking about all the questions. We did take a break after 45 minutes and continued 15 minutes after that with a follow-up question that I posed that is also in the appendix. As I said before, I did record it. I had consent and took notes. Same with the interview. I did record those as well. They also had consent, and those lasted roughly 30 minutes. And again, I just really wanted a casual atmosphere. I wanted them to feel comfortable talking to me, and I wanted them to really tell me their opinions. I felt this was the most important for getting an accurate reading of what they thought and what their opinions were. So I really did try to emphasize a casual conversation. So with my results, I was shocked by a lot of them, but not so surprised by others. To begin, I kind of posed the question of, how long do you think media is? Like, how long do you think mass shootings in the media last? And in the focus group, they all said 1 week. And I felt that I wasn't surprised by that. And in the interviews, that was the same thing as well. They all said, yeah, I agree that 1 week is probably the most we see it. And then it kind of led into a question of, well, do you see a trend in mass media? And do you see a trend in print media specifically relating to mass shootings? And the focus group said, they all agreed, and they said, yes, we do. We see the coverage of the mass shooting for a day. Then it goes into the victims and profiling the victims. And then they talk about the shooter a little bit, and then it goes right into an emphasis of gun reform. So that was consistent across the board. When I asked that in my interview, one of the participants agreed that that is exactly what she thought. However, the other participant said that he didn't really think about it. He didn't really think that there was a trend, and now that he does think about it, that there might be, but it's something that he didn't even recognize before, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. I asked what would be the difference between print coverage in Columbine versus print coverage in Parkland, and the focus group was unanimous and said that Parkland was topical, and that's why it had the most coverage and lasted months compared to other mass shootings, just because it was topical, because of the reform that was happening from it, because of the students that were at Marjory Stoneman Douglas that decided to make a reform. They decided to put themselves out there and engage in print media specifically, like I mentioned in the Times article. Then it kind of led into a question of, why do students or adults really not, why do you think that it only lasts 1 week in the media? And again, everybody did say that they have become desensitized, and there's just no pertinence anymore to print media and the coverage in print media, because there is that shift today in social media, and that's not something that we saw in 1999. In 1999, there was a big emphasis in print media, but today we really just see a push on social media. So the focus group said that there was a push for a sad story. They felt that in newspapers, if it was a sad story, it was a good story. And this came up in my interviews as well. And they also felt that in the newspaper you see things that are trying to make people empathetic or sympathetic to what's going on in the tragedies. They also led into saying that, it was different back then. In 1999, you focused on mental health, you focused on bullying. And today, all the newspapers talk about is who's the big politician, what gun reform can happen, what is this politician saying versus this politician, and how does that create a trend. They also said it varies by region. So some people didn't understand that it could happen, whatever happened in Florida might not be as prominent as what happened in Connecticut. So these were just kind of some of the things that were expected, but I was still surprised by a lot of them. So this kind of concludes my research. I hope to dive more into this research with media and mass shootings, and I kind of want to look at more social media and mass shootings and all that in the future. So thank you so much.